Hi, and welcome to another edition of Mysterious Forces Live. We're here at the 2019 International UFO Congress in Phoenix, Arizona. And it just so happened that I was taken by complete surprise and crossed paths with James Goodall. And he hardly needs any introduction in the ufology field. He's an engineer. He's written, 26 books now?
Working on 27.
Working on 27. And he decided to stop by the booth and just talk to us for a few minutes. And Jim, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, and this is my second one. Came down here because my friend Michael Schratt said he was going to be here. George Knapp is going to be here. So I figured I'd come down and give him a visit, or come up and give him a visit.
Right, and you're friends with George, so you just came up to talk to him and see his lecture?
Not to see his lecture. I mean, what he's talking about, I've heard off and on for the last 30 some odd years. No, I just wanted to, George and I are friends, and I wanted to connect with him and Jeremy Corbell to make sure everything is set up properly for the Storm Area 51 base camp.
Right, understood. And you guys are going to be somewhat not directly participating in that, but you're going to be covering it or there to observe?
We're going to be about 50 miles from Rachel.
Okay.
I've been to the fence line at Area 51 in Tonopah over 80 times in the last 40 years.
Okay.
And it's, I love the desert. There are people going to be out in of the Storm Area 51 group that have never been in the desert. And if you don't bring enough water, if you don't bring sunscreen, if you don't bring something, protection on your head, and if you don't watch out for critters, you're going to be in trouble.
Right.
Now, in the 80 some odd times I've been out in the desert snooping on the government, which is one of my favorite things to do, I've only ever seen one snake. And it was on top of the Groom Range. Glenn Campbell had come up to the top. I was up there with Stu Brown from Popular Science, and this is a long time ago. They said, "Hey, you want to see a rattlesnake?" I said, "Well, not particularly, because we've been sleeping on the ground." Mm-hmm. So about 25, 30 yards from us was about a 3.5, 4 foot timber rattler. And he didn't want to have anything to do with us.
Right.
And Glenn kept messing with him, and it kept going away. So, But I love a desert. I love everything about it. It clears your mind. You go out there, there's no cell phone, there's no email, there's no TV, there's no radio. It's just you and the desert. Mm-hmm. And the desert can be very beautiful, and the desert can be very harsh.
Right, yeah. And just so that the viewers know, something like you can't know unless you're here. Earlier we saw we saw Richard Dolan go all fanboy over Jim Goodall here. Richard Dolan is a big fan of his work, and so was really excited to see Jim here walking around. And speaking of your history at Tonopah and out at Area 51, if some of my viewers don't know, can you give just a brief background on your connection with John Lear and Bob Lazar?
Well, I've known John Lear since the early 70s. I met him through my friend John Andrews from Testers, who also did the first kit
I have one
on the F-117 and Bob Lazar's sports model. But I had been out in the desert with John Lear. This is I think it's late 88 or early 89. I have my notes somewhere at home. And I had just photographed the F-117. There was only one photo of it released by the Air Force. It was a terrible image. It was backlit. It was shot with a telephoto, which compresses everything. But I actually saw one in person. And out of 36 exposures, this is before digital cameras, my body was shaking so much. It was like being 12 years old and seeing your first naked girl. I mean, my body was just going like this. I got 2 non-blurry images of the F-117. But by the time we got back to Las Vegas, it was 9:15 at night. The photomats were closed. So I had to wait till the next day. And we were at John Lear's house for about 15 minutes. And he said, "Oh, I got a buddy of mine coming over. I think you'll enjoy meeting him." It turns out it was Bob Lazar. Wow. And this was before Bob went to work out in the desert. And told him what I had, and I said, I don't know if any of the photos turned out. And he said, well, I have a processing unit at home. Just jump in my car. I live in the east. He lives in the west side of town. John lives right near Sunrise Mountain and near the Mormon Temple. So we jump in his car. We're heading over to Lazar's house. And he said, I feel sorry for John Lear. I said, why is that? He said, he's from a world-famous aviation family. The family that brought us Learjet, among other things. I said, and the fool believes in UFOs. He said, I'm a nuclear physicist. If I can't prove it mathematically or touch it, it doesn't exist. And this was about a month and a half, 2 months before he went to work out at S4. And his whole persona changed. Yeah. And he went from being an avid non-believer to the guy who was working on reverse engineering, propulsion system for alien craft. And his story has never changed. Mm-hmm. And it would have been beneficial. He would have made a lot of money if he would have just embellished everything he said, but he didn't. Right. And there's just too many things that have happened or haven't happened that tells me Bob Lazar is real. Mm-hmm. Probably a good example is I was activated for Desert Shield and Desert Storm. I was in the Air Guard. I had 5 years active, 10-year break, and then went into the Minnesota Air Guard. So I'm in the Pentagon. I'm a historian. Mm-hmm. I have Bob Lazar's W-2. His Social Security number is blocked out, but everything else is there. Mm-hmm. And I had some time over lunch hour, and so I decided I was to see if I can track down where his place of employment, not employment, his place where they paid him for his employment.
Right.
So it was U.S. Navy Investigative something. So I look up in the U.S. Navy Investigative Services. It was in the Pentagon. So I'm in uniform. At the time, I was a tech sergeant, E6. I go into the Office of Naval Investigations. There's a Lieutenant J.G. behind the desk. And I said, sir, can you tell me where this is? And I handed him Bob's W-2. He looks at it, said, excuse me for a minute. He goes into the 2-stars office, comes back out. Now I'm in uniform. And he said, the Admiral will see you now. Jeez, I didn't come here to see the Admiral, but okay. So I go in there, I give him a proper salute. He says, parade rest, not at ease, parade rest. So I'm standing there, he's looking at Lazar's W-2, and he looks at me with, if it was a looks could kill type of look.
Right.
He said, you bastard, why are you doing this? Why are you bringing this? So he said, I don't know where, I'm still at parade rest. I said, I don't know where you got this, but if I ever see your face cross the threshold of my office ever again, you'll be the most sorry son of a bitch in the NCO, United States Air Force. And with that, he took Lazar's W-2 and put it in a shredder.
Wow.
So right there, that was a big telltale as far as I was concerned. I mean, there was a big red flag. Bob was probably real. When George Knapp was doing an investigation into Bob's background, there was just too many things that he said or people he said he worked with, where he worked at, were all verified. And his stories never changed, and it was to his benefit. And Ben Rich was a very, very dear friend. Not a dear friend. We talked at least once a quarter for over 25 years. If I didn't call him, he would call me. If I called him at the Skunkworks, June, his secretary, she recognized my voice over the years. Whether he was in a meeting or not, she'd put me through. He put me on speakerphone. I could tell there's people in the background. And we would sit and talk for 30, 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
About a little bit of everything. He said, Ben told me, he said, what amazes me about you and John Andrews from Testers is you can peer through this tiny little crack and you can just see a piece of the puzzle over here and maybe a piece of the puzzle over here. And you're putting together the package and you're about 95% correct. But the way Ben looked at it, if you aren't 100% correct, you're wrong.
Right.
But I think that and his correspondence with John Andrews and my passion for the Blackbird and other things that go bump in the night, we just sort of had a kinship between the two of us. And just before he died, he was at USC Medical Center. He had esophageal cancer.
Right.
He had been breathing that nasty stuff they make low observable stuff with.
Okay.
And he said, we were talking, he said, I'm disappointed in John Andrews. And I said, why is that? He said, well, his Aurora model. He said, the volume's too small. A Mach 12 airplane would have to have, fuel by liquid methane, would have to have an internal volume at least 4 times that. So I didn't ask him about Aurora. I didn't ask him, did it go Mach 12? He told me. So then we continued the conversation, and he said, Jim, we have things out in the desert. Now, he didn't say Area 51, because none of those guys will say Area 51.
Right.
He said, we have things out in the desert that is 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. Not what you think you can make in 50 years, but what you can comprehend. Mm-hmm. And if you see movies like Star Trek or Star Wars, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. I said, Ben, you want to expand upon that? He said, no. And that was pretty much the end of our conversation, because the doctors were coming in. They were doing some procedures on him. So that was the last time I talked to him. Mm-hmm. But for Ben to tell me, based on everything else that I've seen and heard and whatever, talking about UFOs, things that go bump in the night, I have to believe in my heart of hearts that they're real. Step back to Lazar, years ago when someone asked Edward Teller about Bob Lazar. Now, if Bob was a fraud, Teller would have said that. But because he worked on a classified program, you could neither confirm nor deny the person. Right. So his response, and that of everybody Bob said he worked with, was no comment. If Bob would have been a fraud, the people he said he worked with, the people who said that hired him, would have said, hey, the guy's full of it. Right. 1, he's not an engineer. 2, he never worked out in the desert. 3, he's full of it. Mm-hmm. None of it. All of them said that no comment. And anything classified you can neither confirm nor deny. So that, based on everything else over the last 30 years I've known Lazar, tells me that he's the real deal.
Right.
And I interviewed. I've been focusing on Area 51 as far as research forever. I'm a hardware guy. I'm not a alien, hunter or whatever. My thing is hardware. And so I've done a lot of digging about Area 51. I went and interviewed a gentleman who's the facility manager at Area 51 from 80 to about 84, retired SR-71 pilot. Okay. I won't give his last name because I'm not sure if he's dead or alive. Most of his emails have come back as non-deliverable, so he probably has passed away. But he was an SR-71 pilot. He's on a training program out of Kadena, Okinawa. Mm-hmm. It's late 72, early 73 time frame. He's on a night training flight in the far western Pacific. It says about 11:15 at night, 3/4 moon. He said he's about 78,000 feet at Mach 2.7, just cruising along. And he gets a glint of something metallic off the 3/4 moon. Mm-hmm. At first he thinks it may be another SR-71. So he gets on secure voice, contacts Kadena, Okinawa. Said, we have another bird up. Said, no, you're up there by yourself. Said, no, I'm not. So he said, I'm going to take a closer look. So he advanced the throttles. Now he's at 78,000 or thereabouts. The object is about 85,000 feet at 5 or 6 miles to his starboard side. So it's about a 10-degree bank. He pushes the throttle forward. He's starting to climb, and he's banking in towards this object. He said when he was about 83,000 feet, probably a mile or two still away from this thing, he can't get a definite shape. It's not a smooth surface. It has edges to it. That's where he's getting the glint. He said this thing took off at about a 30-degree angle of attack and left him in the dust like he was heading the other direction. Now, he's doing 2,100 miles an hour, and this thing went boom. He said he lost track of it going between 180 and 200,000 feet, and he estimates Mach 12, Mach 14, something like that. So that was in 72, 73 time frame. Fast forward to 1980, 81. He's the facility manager at Area 51. He's responsible for all non-program aircraft. So the chase airplanes, the hack airplanes, the proficiency airplanes, but not the flight test aircraft. So he got comfortable with, he knew most everybody anyway, but once he was comfortable with everybody, he started asking questions. Do we have a Mach 12 airplane out there? And described it, what he did and whatever. And he said he got confirmation from absolutely nobody at Area 51 that anything like that was ever operating out of Area 51. Now, is there another location? I've been told that there is. I've been told that it's in the extreme northeast corner of Nevada. And a friend of mine was there hunting a number of years ago. I mean, it's remote. I mean, there's some roads there, but they're not. I mean, I wouldn't take my car on it. My car only has about this much clearance anyway. And out of nowhere, two Humvees showed up with guys in desert BDU, desert camouflage utilities. And I said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "We're out here deer hunting or antelope hunting. Here's our hunting license. Here's our tags." And these guys basically told my friend, "You're not going to do hunting here is not very good. We suggest you leave." Now, when someone arrives in a Humvee and they're armed to the teeth, and they say that, hunting's not very good here, I suggest you leave, that's when you turn around and you leave.
Right.
So that leads me to believe that the new base, and it's an operational base from what I've been told, is in the extreme northeast corner of Nevada.
So what impact do you think the TTSA release of videos and information, how do you think that's impacted ufology? Do you think it's had a big impact, or do you think it's minimal in that the government already has a long history on knowing what's going on, and this is just like the tip of the iceberg?
I think it's the tip of the iceberg. And the government, I think the government, the CIA, the alphabets, I think they're trying to desensitize the general public to the fact that, hey, we're not alone. Allegedly, when Spielberg was trying to put together E.T., he hit brick walls everywhere. And out of the blue, he got a call from an agency out of Washington, D.C. that's from what I understand, is a public relations arm of the CIA.
Oh, wow.
And they would give money to people who wanted to put forth a program that shows aliens as friendly. UFOs, same with Star Wars, UFOs, such as the Millennium Falcon or whatever, as, hey, it's okay. It's okay. I think one of these days, much like in the movie Mars Attacks, you're gonna have a news conference with the president, regardless of who the president is at the time, and as it could be viewed, maybe he's making a major announcement around the world, and for all we know, they're in contact with the president. And during this live broadcast, one lands on the Rose Garden lawn. Now, there have been too many people, pilots and astronauts, it was Story Musgrave when they were doing repair on the Hubble,
Right.
and he was outside for 5 or 6 hours at a time, and someone asked him, he said, "What are you doing in your spare time?" And very seriously, he says, "I'm keeping an eye open, or I'm looking for UFOs."
Wow.
Yeah. There's been broadcasts from the International Space Station and other spacecraft where all of a sudden the feed's been cut because something is coming up in view, and boom, it's cut. And we may not be the controlling entity as far as their security on these alleged events.
I see.
We may not be in charge. I'm talking about the United States.
Right.
Our government may have a mandate or warnings that you're to discredit anybody who actually sees us or photographs us, and we're not going to allow you, the federal government, to release anything. I'd heard back in the late 70s, early 80s, John Andrews has since passed away. He was a good friend of Linda Moulton Howe. Mm-hmm. Now, I have never sat down with Linda, other than briefly saying hello. But I was told via John that she was given, just a whole pile of very, very sensitive stuff. Original film, original video, 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter of UFOs. And she was charged to put together a documentary validating the fact that we're not alone. And I was told that about 3/4 of the way through her editing process, they came in and said, you'll get paid for everything, but we're confiscating everything, all your raw tape, everything we gave you, everything you put together. And they took it all. And I don't know what happened to everything. I don't know what. Again, I haven't sat down and talked with Linda. I think it'd be fascinating to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
But there was a willingness at one time in the late 70s, early 80s, that they were going to release information on UFOs, but it didn't happen.
Someone pulled the plug on that
Jimmy,
level of disclosure.
Jimmy Carter said, "When I'm elected president, the first thing I'm going to do is open the drawers, the filing cabinets up that are locked up on UFOs." The day after he was sworn in, he denied ever saying that. Barry Goldwater, he started one of the first UFO groups here in Arizona.
Right, Arizona Center.
And shortly after, when he started his candidacy for presidency in '64, all of a sudden, his name and everything associated with that disappeared, and he never said anything more about UFOs. Mm-hmm. They threatened him. Did he see something that scared the daylights out of him? The old saying that the aliens have invited us over for dinner, but we're the main course. So.
Right. Do you know anything about the alleged metamaterials that Art Bell supposedly passed off to Linda Moulton Howe, which is now in possession of the TTSA?
No. I've heard of it, but I really have no. Again, my area of expertise is hardware, but it's Ben Rich, John Andrews, John Lear, Bob Lazar, Area 51, and the fact I've interviewed so many people who have had a direct first-person involvement, either chasing, seeing, or doing something with UFOs.
And before we close out this episode, I was wondering if you could just briefly tell the audience, for those who don't know, you were one of the engineers that helped develop the navigation system for the SR-71, and I'm a big fan of the SR-71. I've gone down to the Pima Air and Space Museum and seen the one that they have, which is the only one in the country that you can touch. It's the only one you can come up close to and touch. And it's an amazing machine, and I've studied a lot of information on it. Can you just talk about what it was like to be in on the team developing the Blackbird?
Well, I wasn't really in there to develop it. I was At 18 years old, I was stationed in Denver, Colorado. I was a ground-based telemetry person. I got a set of orders to go to Edwards Air Force Base to support 3 aircraft going through Category 1 testing. It was a YC-141, the XB-70 Valkyrie, and a classified program. And on March 10th, 1964, long time ago, I saw my first Blackbird.
The year before I was born, so yeah.
I saw my first Blackbird, and I have never been the same since. And I was there to support those programs. So I was at Edwards for about 2.5 months. But it's affected me my whole life. And the other thing that's so typical of the government, they have their official policy is not to cooperate. And in 1968, I asked, and I was willing to pay for 8 to 10 color 8x10 glossies of the Blackbird. The photographs weren't classified then. They never were classified. Anything in the air you can't consider classified unless something's hanging from it. And the official policy was not to cooperate, so I started digging. And the deeper I dug, the more I found out. The more I found out, the deeper I dug. And it got to a point that I became, from a historical point of view, the most knowledgeable person on the planet on the history, development, flight test, and operation of all 3 manned Blackbirds. The A-12 Blackbird, the YF-12 Interceptor, and that's what I saw for the first time, and the SR-71 Blackbird. I've interviewed most everyone that's crashed one. I interviewed virtually all the test pilots who flew the original A-12 and the YF-12. And I acquired one for the Minnesota Air Guard Museum that ended up now on a pylon at headquarters CIA. So my passion runs deep and long.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do not use this word lightly. You are a legend in engineering. And no, you are. You're a living legend in engineering and ufology and this military hardware. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I had no idea you'd be here. And the fact that we crossed paths, we chatted earlier off camera for a long time. And you're very approachable and very down to earth. And it's just amazing to meet someone with your credentials and your experience. And you're a down-to-earth guy, and your ego isn't blown up like the size of Montana.
My love affair with the Blackbird and things that go bump in the night. I've been married quite a few times, and all my wives...
There's the ego part, right?
Yeah. So one of these days, I'll get it right, and I got it right this time. But I just if there's something that you truly believe in, and it's part of you, then by all means do whatever you can within the confines of the law. Dig as much information as you can on the airplane. I mean, there's very few guys who can say, hey, I scrounged a Blackbird and 2 C-5s to move it. And I'm the only person on the planet to be in the cockpit of a Blackbird at Mach 0.72 at 30,000 feet inside a C-5. That's how we moved it from Palmdale to Minnesota.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that was funny. I mean, that was like winning the Stanley Cup, the World Series, and the Super Bowl all in one day. And it's the most fun I've ever had.
No, absolutely. That would have to be. So can you give us just a sneak peek about the topic of the book that you're writing?
Well, I'm working on book 27. Book 25 was my, it's probably my shining star. It's from Shepherd Publishing. It's a 220-page hardbound book on the history and development of the Blackbirds. 711 photos, 224 pages. Book 25 will be out this spring. It's on the Virginia Seawolf class fast attacks. 160 pages, all color. And they're photo essays. Book 26 is the Ohio class fleet ballistic missile submarines and arsenal boat. And book 27, which I've been working on pretty much full time, is a pictorial history of the first 75 years of the Lockheed Skunkworks.
That's amazing.
And that will be a Sheffer Publishing hardbound book. And right now I'm pushing 300 pages, so it's gonna be a 300 plus page book.
Wow.
And I haven't even put in the what ifs.
Right.
And
do you have a targeted release date, even an estimated one?
I want to have my completed, finished book with a layout and probably 60 to 70,000 words of just photo captions to my publisher by year's end. That's what I'm shooting for.
Very cool. And where can people find your books? And are you still doing lectures?
Anybody who wants me to come and do a lecture, they get me there and give me something to make put a smile on my face. I'll go anywhere.
Right.
My books are on low observables, with one exception. I did a pictorial on this Nimitz class carriers, and they're about as big as a radar cross section as you can find. But I did the B2 book. They even let me fly the simulator, which was exciting. And I've been to 400 feet deep in a ballistic missile submarine, and I've been up in the sail of an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine going through the Straits of Juan de Fuca, and I know right behind me is 100 hydrogen bombs. And I'm sitting up there as we're going through the Straits of Juan de Fuca. We're going in there for some angles and dangles, and they'll turn around, drop off non-essential personnel, and they were going out on patrol. But behind me was somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 400 kiloton nuclear weapons.
Wow.
And there they were, the first stealth machines. And these guys go out. I mean, here you have a 560-foot long tube. It's 42 feet in diameter. It's about 140 people on it. And they're underwater for 70 or 80 days. The only limiting factor is food. They can make all the water they want. They can make all the oxygen they want. But it's food. Mm-hmm. So they'll go into Pearl Harbor, or they'll go into Guam, or they'll meet up with a resupply ship. The Emery Land is the one that's in Guam. And I'm waiting. All I'm waiting for right now is to shoot one of the Arsenal boats, the four early Ohio boats, the Ohio, Florida, Michigan, and Georgia. Because of salt, they could no longer be ballistic missile submarines, so they converted them to Arsenal boats. They carry up to 154 cruise missiles each. Well, the Michigan is in Guam right now, and it has been for the last 7 months. They're just waiting for the short Nork from North Korea to do something stupid.
Right.
I don't think he will, but that's my opinion. But it keeps me off the streets. I've had little red dots on my chest, so I know what it's like to.
Right.
I had Naval Investigative Service knocked on my door one morning at 5:30 in the morning. And I'm still in bed, and wife went down, opened looked at the door, and he said, "There's two young men with crew cuts, ill-fitting suit and slacks." Said they're either they're the feds, I think. So I came downstairs, and it was about a paint job for a non-classified Marine airplane. So we were told to investigate. You were asking our government question. They said, as an American taxpayer, it's my right and my duty to question my government. Mm-hmm. He said, well, you were asking questions about the OA-4M. It's a Douglas Skyhawk. The Marine Corps used it for electronic warfare of sorts. And he said, I wrote the commanding general of the 3rd Marine Air Wing asking for the paint scheme for the OA-4M. That's all I asked. And you guys are coming from D.C. to interview me at 5:30 in the morning? So I went down to the basement. I brought an SR-71 flight manual, dropped it on the table, said, now if I had asked about this 10 years ago, then there would be a reason for you to come here. But this thing, it used to be top secret. It isn't anymore. The paint job on an A4M never was classified. So what are you guys doing here? Oh, and I gave them coffee and I made I had some rolls and they were very, very nice, and they left and they said, no, it's our job. We just had to we had to make sure that you were in the up and up. I said, I have a top secret SCI clearance that I need as a historian for my unit. I have to have the same clearance as the wing commander.
Above their pay grade, probably.
No, up to their pay grade, but it's...
No, I mean the guys investigating.
Absolutely. They probably have a confidential with secret access if needed, but not anything higher. Yeah, I was never given access to anything that I knew was classified or something that I didn't know about.
Right.
So, but there's stuff out there, and I'm delighted to be part of the original Dreamland Interceptors.
That's right. Well, Jim Goodall, they're getting ready to close the vendors hall down.
Okay.
So we're going to wrap up this episode of Mysterious Forces Live. But thank you so much, Jim, for coming on the show. I have so much respect for you and your work, and I'm truly honored to sit down and have a few words with you, and I really appreciate it.
Right. I'm delighted that anybody knows who I am.
There are plenty of people in this room that know who you are. That's right. Well, thank you for joining us on this extremely special episode of Mysterious Forces Live. If you haven't hit that like button, do it. If you haven't hit subscribe, smash that subscribe button. And don't forget to share this video. This was a great interview, and this should go viral. Everyone who's into ufology and engineering and aircraft, this is a golden interview right here. So, Jim, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for spending your time with Mysterious Forces Live. And we'll catch you again from the 2019 International UFO Congress right here in Phoenix, Arizona. Thanks, everyone. Thanks.